Just hours ago, Alberta lit the fuse on what could become the most explosive fight over North America's energy future in years. After Ottawa effectively slammed the door on a new US-Canada pipeline deal, citing environmental hurdles, Indigenous consultation requirements, and a lack of strategic necessity. Alberta's premier dropped a political and economic bombshell. The province is actively courting private proposals for an all-new oil pipeline straight to the Pacific. Why does this matter? Because Alberta isn't just Canada's oil powerhouse. It's the beating heart of an industry that ships over 4.2 million barrels per day, fuels refineries from Chicago to Shanghai, and keeps billions flowing into federal coffers. But with the US market increasingly tangled in court battles over Line 5, the Keystone XL compensation claim dead in the water, and British Columbia signaling no appetite for more pipelines, Alberta just signaled it's willing to go it alone. This isn't just about steel in the ground. It's about who controls the flow of energy, who gets the revenue, and whether Canada will cling to its traditional US export route or pivot hard toward Asia. And the stakes? Billions in royalties, the stability of Canada's federal-provincial balance, and the future of a continent's energy map. Today, we dig into the politics, the money, the global oil chessboard, and the winners and losers in a battle that's just getting started. To understand why Alberta's announcement just sent shockwaves through the energy world, you have to rewind through a decade of pipeline politics that's been anything but smooth. First, the Keystone XL saga, once pitched as the crown jewel of Canada-US energy integration. Designed to carry 830,000 barrels per day of Alberta crude to Nebraska and down to Gulf Coast refineries, it was killed not once, but twice. In January 2021, on his very first day in office, President Joe Biden revoked its presidential permit. Alberta and pipeline developer TC Energy fought back, demanding $15 billion in damages under NAFTA's investor state rules. But in July 2024, a trade tribunal tossed out the claim entirely, leaving Alberta with a massive sunk cost and zero legal victory. Then came Line 5, a 70-year-old pipeline snaking through Wisconsin and Michigan, delivering crude and natural gas liquids to the US Midwest and Ontario. The state of Michigan has been trying to shut down a segment under the Straits of Mackinac since 2020, citing environmental risks. Enbridge proposed burying it in a tunnel, a $500 million engineering fix. But lawsuits, tribal opposition, and now the US Supreme Court's involvement have kept the project in limbo. For Alberta, it's a reminder that US energy corridors are politically fragile. At home, Ottawa's Impact Assessment Act, Bill C-69, became another flashpoint. Alberta has called it the No More Pipelines Law, arguing it gives the federal government too much power to stall major energy projects. In October 2023, the Supreme Court of Canada sided, partially, with Alberta, declaring much of the law unconstitutional. This cracked the door open for provinces to assert more control over infrastructure approvals. And yet, even with that win, Alberta faces another obstacle: British Columbia. The province has made it clear it's not eager to see another oil pipeline through its territory. The $34 billion Trans Mountain Expansion, TMX, completed in 2024, already tripled capacity to the West Coast, and BC politicians are arguing it's enough. Add in opposition from some First Nations along proposed routes, and the political path westward looks steep. So here's the setup. Alberta's US pipeline options are under siege in courts. Ottawa's environmental gatekeeping just took a legal hit, but it's still there. British Columbia is tightening its stance on new oil corridors. And yet, global demand for heavy crude, especially in Asia, is climbing, with TMX already shipping Alberta oil to China, India, Japan, and South Korea. That's the geopolitical pressure cooker in which Premier Danielle Smith just dropped her latest bombshell: an open invitation for private industry to propose a new pipeline to the Pacific, bypassing the political choke points to the south. If Alberta's announcement sounded bold, the numbers show why they think the timing is right and why the stakes are enormous. Let's start with current export capacity. The Trans Mountain Expansion, TMX, came online in May 2024, boosting throughput from roughly 300,000 barrels per day to 890,000 barrels per day. That single change instantly opened a tidewater route for Alberta crude, letting tankers sail directly to Asia from the port of Vancouver. Since launch, TMX has redrawn Canada's export map. In the first full year, China became the top buyer, averaging around 207,000 barrels per day, overtaking the US on that route. South Korea, Japan, India, and Taiwan have also booked consistent cargoes. This diversification is exactly what Alberta has been demanding for years. Next, pricing power. For decades, Alberta's Western Canadian Select WCS traded at a steep discount to West Texas Intermediate WTI, often $15 to $20 per barrel. Post TMX, that gap has narrowed sharply. In the second quarter of 2025, the spread averaged about $10 per barrel, a massive gain for producers. In August 2025, it's holding around $12 to $12.25 per barrel. That means Alberta is clawing back billions in lost revenue. Analysts estimate the narrowing spread could add 13 billion Canadian dollars in annual income to Canadian producers if maintained. On logistics, the shift is just as clear. Crude by rail shipments, the overflow option when pipelines are full, have plunged to their lowest levels in 8 years, freeing producers from costly rail tariffs. Pipeline exports hit a record approximately 3.75 million barrels per day in 2024, with total crude exports averaging approximately 4.2 million barrels per day. That's near Canada's effective ceiling given current infrastructure. However, there's a catch: tolls and operating costs. Shippers on TMX have complained about high tolls, which could limit the pipeline's competitiveness if oil prices fall or demand dips. The federal government, which still owns TMX, is in a tight spot. Recoup costs without pricing out the very producers the project was built for. A second West Coast pipeline could ease this pressure by creating competition in transport rates. But it would require billions in investment and face intense regulatory scrutiny. And then there's Alberta's fiscal reality. The province is projecting a 5.2 billion Canadian dollar deficit for fiscal 2025 to 26. Any shock, like a US import tariff on Canadian crude, could blow that hole wider. More export routes to Asia would reduce dependence on US refineries, giving Alberta some insulation against political risk from Washington. So, when Alberta signals it's ready to greenlight a new Pacific pipeline proposal, it's not just posturing. It's a calculated play based on a rare alignment of market gains, global demand trends, and infrastructure bottlenecks. The question is, who wins and who loses if this actually moves forward? If Alberta's gamble pays off, the first to taste victory will be the province's own oil producers, and by extension, the provincial treasury. The reason is simple. Every dollar shaved off that stubborn WCS-WTI discount means hundreds of millions more flowing into company coffers and government royalties. Over the past year, TMX has already narrowed the gap, but a second Pacific outlet could give Alberta something it's never really had before: the power to play transport rates against each other. That kind of leverage is golden in a business where every cent on the barrel counts. Across the Pacific, heavy crude refiners in Asia would be just as eager to see Alberta succeed. In cities from Dalian to Mumbai, massive cokers and hydrocrackers are hungry for barrels that look exactly like what Canada pumps out of the oil sands. For them, a dependable stream of Canadian heavy offers a way to hedge against Middle East instability and the lingering uncertainties of Venezuelan supply. Locking in multi-year contracts from a politically stable supplier could become a competitive edge in their own markets. The economic ripple wouldn't stop there. If steel meets soil, it would set off a surge of jobs across Canada's trades: welders, pipe fitters, crane operators, marine crews at port. Every loaded tanker heading west would mean work for harbor pilots, shipyard labor, and fueling services. And for producers with strong finances and a credible environmental track record, the moment would be ripe to capture the most lucrative transport deals and long-term customer relationships. But every big winner comes at someone's expense. In the US Midwest and along parts of the Gulf Coast, refiners have long enjoyed a kind of buyer's discount thanks to Alberta's dependence on southbound pipelines. If Alberta can redirect more barrels seaward, those refineries could see their supply cushion thin and their feedstock costs climb. The same goes for crude by rail operators. Once the overflow valve for Canada's constrained system, they'd be left fighting for scraps if pipeline capacity keeps pace with production. Even Ottawa isn't immune to risk. The federal government still owns TMX, and if tolls stay high while a new competitor undercuts them, some shippers will inevitably shift away. That would make selling TMX to the private sector at a good price even harder, leaving taxpayers to absorb the financial drag. And hovering over it all is the question of social license. In Canada's current climate, any project that skimps on Indigenous equity participation or environmental safeguards is inviting years of legal and political warfare, the kind that can bury a pipeline long before the first weld is made. This is the new balance of power Alberta is trying to reshape. A bet that the right allies will rally behind its vision, and that the opponents, however loud, won't be able to stop the steel from going in the ground. Alberta's announcement isn't just a headline grab. It's a shot across the bow in a fight that will unfold over years. On paper, the timing looks perfect. TMX is proving that Pacific Tidewater access can transform Alberta's pricing power. Asia's appetite for heavy crude is growing, and the province has a political tailwind from the Supreme Court's partial takedown of Ottawa's project assessment law. But the road ahead is littered with hazards. British Columbia's resistance hasn't softened. If anything, it's hardening. Without deep Indigenous partnerships and airtight environmental plans, a new pipeline westward could be mired in the same legal quicksand that trapped so many before it. In the US, Line 5's legal battles remain unresolved, leaving Midwest refineries nervously watching Alberta's diversification moves. Meanwhile, global oil markets are as unpredictable as ever. A sharp demand slowdown, a price collapse, or a policy shift in Asia could all change the calculus overnight. For Alberta, the choice is stark. Keep pushing into US markets that are increasingly volatile and politically fraught, or double down on Asia, where the prizes are bigger, but the route is tougher. That's why this bombshell is more than a press conference soundbite. It's a strategic pivot that could redraw the map of North American energy flows. And for viewers, the question is simple. Should Alberta gamble on breaking westward again, knowing the political storms that lie ahead? Because if this bet pays off, it could rewire trade patterns for decades. If it fails, it may be the last time we see a Canadian province try to punch through a pipeline wall this high. If you want to stay ahead of these high-stakes battles, where oil, politics, and global power collide, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The next twist in this story could drop at any moment, and when it does, you'll want to be here to catch it first.